Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on Keyshot fundamentals. My name's James, I'm a design consultant here at Emixa UK, and I'll be hosting this session. Starting off with the content, here's what we're going to be looking at today. We'll start by answering the question of what is Keyshot, then we'll look at how to access it, a rundown of the licensing, and then a showcase of the basics within Keyshot alongside it working with SolidEdge. We will then finish off by showing you how Keyshot works with Siemens NX. So, first things first, what is Keyshot? Well, Keyshot is a market-leading software in photo and video rendering produced by the company Keyshot. For those of you that have used Keyshot before, or who have come across it in the past, will have known them by Luxian. Keyshot provides easy-to-learn tools along with super-fast real-time rendering solutions that allow you to create a hyper-accurate representation of your products without the need to make physical prototypes. As I said in the previous slide, Keyshot is a market-leading software in photo and video rendering space. Keyshot has over 10,000 companies using their products across 184 different countries. Across these companies, they have over 231,000 creators and 6,000 ambassadors that aid in creating and sharing content not just for marketing purposes, but also for engineering purposes like instruction manuals and other technical documentation. Right, so how do we access Keyshot? There are actually a few ways that we can access it. The simplest way is to use Keyshot that you receive when you purchase a classic or premium subscription of SolidEdge. However, this license is restricted in the features you can use, so you may be tempted to upgrade your subscription to a pro or a full subscription. For this, you have a few additional options in that you purchase directly through Emixa, which will give you the added benefit of our technical support. So in terms of licensing, in the older versions of Keyshot, there actually used to be quite a few different licensing costs. So Keyshot CAD referred to the SolidEdge license, or other CAD licenses, through various different vendors. Then there was HD, Pro, Pro Floating, and Enterprise. Well, now it's all under the one subscription. So no more do you have to go ahead and find out the one you want. Whenever you upgrade to a full subscription, you get everything available. However though, there are additional plugins and add-ons that you can add onto Keyshot to give you further functionality, whether it be for VR, for Keyshot Studio Web, network rendering, NX plugins, and various others. If you would like to know more about these plugins, please do feel free to get in touch with your Emixa sales representative or go to the Keyshot website. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can import data into Keyshot. So there's two ways. The first way I'm going to show you now, which is essentially to bring in a translated file type like a step or anything else into Keyshot. From here, what we can do is we can adjust various different parameters, like the configuration that we bring in, the Z direction, and various other quality settings. Once that's been imported, we can see that the Keyshot will then bring in our model along with all of the exported parts, and even in the model colors that have been assigned to in CAD. Now in terms of updating data, it's pretty much the exact same thing. So if I was to go back into the import function, go and bring in my second or my new model, this will then give me the option whether I want to either add it to the scene, add it to an empty scene, or update geometry. And again, we can also then change any display configurations, quality, or any other parameters that we need. Using the update geometry function, this is going to allow us to go ahead and essentially update that geometry. So from here, what it's going to do is it's not going to replace anything, or it's not going to remove any progress that you've made. So let's say you've been working on this render for quite some time, you've made a change to the model, and you want that to be reflected in your render. This update geometry will only ever update the actual CAD model rather than any materials or textures or anything else you've applied. However, though, you can see that when this now updates, because we've not really done anything at the moment, then not much is going to change. However, though, this will be kind of accentuated a bit more in the solid edge section in a second. But now that's finished, we can see that the model has been updated with very minute updates in this case. But again, like I said, no materials have been affected. Okay, so let's have a look at how we do that within Siemens Solid Edge. If I go to the Tools tab, you can see that we've got the Keyshot render button. Well, we can also go ahead and specify any settings that we would like. So from here we can specify the image size and quality. And all we need to do is simply hide or show the parts that we want to render. After I hit the Keyshot render, this will then transfer my model from Solid Edge into Keyshot, where I can then change any image sizing, any materials, or anything else I'd like to adjust to my render. Now as you can see, that racing stripe hasn't come through quite right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and switch back to Solid Edge. I'm then going to hide that racing stripe, and I'm then going to go and hit Keyshot update. Now what's going to happen here is essentially the model is going to be re-imported, and our model is correct. Okay, so let's have a look at setting image sizes and cameras. So starting off with image size, you probably saw that I changed my image size to fit my screen. Well, this is different to how we set the image size for the render. So what you're seeing now is just purely for my benefit. However though, we can set the image size for our render just by going into the Project tab down the bottom here, and then going into the Image column. So you can see that with the Image column I can set a preset at the very top in either a custom, portrait or landscape. And this will then slightly change the image or the render style. From here I can then add or adjust various different parameters such as vignette, bloom, any denoise, gamma or exposure. And this will change the overall outcome for my image. In terms of setting up cameras, if I go ahead and add a new camera, I'm going to call this one ISO. And to stop it from accidentally moving, I'm going to go ahead and lock it. Now you'll notice that some of these parameters dropping down now aren't able to be edited, and that's just purely because I've locked my camera. If I wanted to change any of these parameters, I can simply unlock them. I can go ahead and do exactly what I need to do. So I can go ahead and change or the focal range or any other kind of parameters that you find typically within a professional camera. Now if I want to make any changes to the model, I can go ahead and use the free camera to make any of those fine-tune adjustments. Right, so far what we've looked at is how to bring in files, how to update them, and also how to set up image size and cameras. So now I'm going to progress on from that and I'm going to show you how we can add and edit materials. And I'm going to show you a few ways, as there's quite a lot that we could do within Keyshot. So firstly, if we go to the Library tab on the left hand side, this is where we can find all of our materials, textures, environments, and colours. So going into material, I know that there's quite a comprehensive list of materials I can add into this, particularly car paint. So if I go down to paint and metallic, I'm now going to go ahead and choose the exact color that I want. Now there is quite a few, so I can either go through and use the drop down menus to find the exact color that I want, or I can go ahead and use the search function within the Keyshot library. However though, I know what paint I want, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop this onto the model in the exact same way that I can do in the style palette within Siemens Solid Edge or in Siemens NX. Now I can either copy this material and then directly paste this onto another part within my model, or I can just simply drag and drop the color onto another part of my model as well. Now you can see that when I do this, I then get a message saying that it's going to be copying, or I'm going to be essentially adding in a pasted material or a linked material. What this means is that whenever I make an adjustment to one part, because that material is linked, it's then going to adjust every single part that is, or that has been assigned to that exact color. So using the search function, I've just gone ahead and added in some rubber to those tires. I'm going to do the same thing with these chrome parts here. And again, I could do the exact same thing. So I can either go ahead and drag and drop the same color onto various different parts, or I can copy and paste these onto every single part that I would like to make chrome in this case. Now you do also have the option to unlink materials, in case you want to make some parts slightly different to others, but with the exact same material. But if not, then you could just go ahead and assign the same color or the same material to to various different parts. And you can see that when I'm doing this, the preview will naturally change within the model. And that's with the materials actively being assigned to those parts. And the good thing about this is that with the material, they will have natural material properties. So if I double click on the part that contains the material, you can see that in the project tab to the right hand side, this then pull up the properties that I'm able to adjust. Now every material will have its natural differences in terms of the properties that you can adjust. However though, in this case with chrome, we've been given the amount of samples, which will increase the quality of that material, the amount of roughness, which will show how dull it is, and various others. So now I've shown you how to add a material and edit its properties. Let me go ahead and show you how we can adjust certain parameters like texture. So within Keyshot, we have various different properties as well as the material properties that we can adjust. And again, this is really just to give this the overall general appearance. So as well as having the roughness, we can also include things like texture, such as bumps or particular materials like leather, have a natural texture to them. So if I go ahead and look at this C, I'm going to go ahead and apply a leather texture to it. Now this might not be particularly obvious now, however though, this does have what we refer to as a bump map. So under materials and under textures, we can see that we've got a bump map and a diffuse. Diffuse is just controlling the colour, however the bump map is really what controls the overall texture. So we can see that at the moment we can set the scale and bump height, and again this is really just telling us how big we want that texture to be, and also how harsh we want the texture to be as well. So if we go ahead and turn on performance mode, it's generally a bit more obvious to see here. However though, if I was to scale the texture right the way down, we can see that it just looks really flat. Likewise, if I turn it all the way up, then this will make it really large. And this is the same for the height, so increasing the height will make this really harsh and make it really bumpy. However, if I turn it all the way down, then this would be a lot flatter. So with this in mind, what I can do is I can specify my texture exactly how I want it to be in order to give me the correct result that I'm looking for. And in terms of leather, I'm just going to set this and leave it be. And maybe reduce the scale of the texture down a little bit so there's something a bit more realistic. Like everything, this stage is really a case of minute adjustments. So you don't need to adjust any major parameters. Really, a small adjustment like 0.1 will do you just fine. Now we can get a better look at what these textures look like just by turning on GPU mode, which is like a very lightweight rendering mode. And I can also turn on denoise as well, to then reduce the overall amount of pixels that I'm seeing in my preview. And this will give me a much more accurate resemblance of what that looks like. Okay, so I'm not entirely happy with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and adjust a few more parameters. And really I'm looking at this area here where my mouse is, because that's really going to give me the most accurate depiction of my texture. I'm actually quite happy with this now, so all I'm going to do is add in another label. And again, I could do this just by going into labels and adding in an image of my own. So when we come to labels, another really good word for this, or another kind of alternative word for this really, is decals. So for this, what we can do is we can add in any images onto our models. So I've gone ahead and added in this Emixa logo. I'm going to use this as a bit of embroidery on the seat. At the moment this does have a white background, but I'm going to go and change this in a bit. But you can see that whenever I add in a label onto the texture, it's naturally going to try and map around the model itself. And you can see this happening with both the A and the E in our logo. However though, if the label hasn't come through quite correctly, we can adjust various parameters again, whether we want it to be flipped, the amount of contrast, how we want it to center. But as well as that, we can also change the diffuse color. So in this case, I'm actually going to choose it to blend with the seat itself. So you can now see instead of having that white background, it's now blended in with the seat itself. However, you might notice that it's still not quite correct in the fact that it's basically plastered on top. So if I choose to apply the bump to the labels as well, then this will make sure that the label also conforms to the texture that that material is made out of. Now if there were any other parameters I wanted to adjust, I can go back, fine tune those, add in any additional textures to get the exact result that I want.
Okay, so now I've shown you how to add materials and textures. Let's see how we can customize these further. So if we focus in on the car body for a minute, we can see this is just a regular texture or a regular material that we've just dragged and dropped on. Well, how can we customize this further? Well, we can use this, or we can do this just by using what we refer to as the material graph. So if I drag and drop that onto the screen, we can see that we've got these two nodes on the page here. Well, we can actually use these nodes to customize the material further. So if I go ahead and add in two color adjust nodes here, we're going to go ahead and use these to adjust the base color and also the metal color. So you can see that when I go ahead and click on one of these points, that the relative or the compatible node points will highlight in orange. And naturally you can see that when I've done this, this is already customized the color as it is. And that's because of the base color here is currently set to black, which is the default. So therefore the material is now colored in black. However, I can change this just by simply going ahead and changing to a different color. And this could be anything that you want, but for me I'm just going to go ahead and maybe do something a little bit like this. And I can now change the colorize color as well. So I can now customize this to my liking. So this example is going to be quite simple, but hopefully this will give you enough of an idea to be able to elaborate on this further. But all I've done here for now is I've just adjusted the base colour so we've got the general colour looking correct. But what we're going to go ahead and do now is add in a secondary colour, which is going to give this a slight pearlescent effect. So for this again, I'm just going to go ahead and put this to a slightly lighter blue. And you can see that now when we've done this, there's naturally there's quite a nice little hue going on in the background. Well, we can change this again just by changing the hue even further. And also the saturation as well. So it's looking either a little bit more shiny or a little bit dull. Increase the value, which again is making minute adjustments to the material itself. We can do these just by using the scroll bars or by inputting values directly. At the moment it's not amazingly obvious as to how this is being adjusted, but these are what we refer to as flakes. At the moment the flake size is currently set to 0, which means that it's just a solid colour underneath. However, if I increase the amount of flakes, or the flake size, you can see there's these little individual specks of the secondary colour, and that's what's giving our material the hue. So those flake sizes are a little bit too big at the moment, so I'm just going to go and reduce it down a little bit until I've got it at a rough point where I think it's acceptable. So I want these material flakes to be a little bit bigger, but not so big they look unnatural. Now ideally I'll be doing this on the secondary screen, however because I'm recording, I'm going to do all this in the one screen, but I can adjust the model in the background as I'm doing this. So I'm going to decrease the flake size down to 0.5 and just see how that looks. And I think for this example that's good enough. But from now I can go ahead and change the flake visibility, so I can make them a little bit more visible or slightly less visible. And actually I'm going to reduce this down a little bit more. Until I'm happy with that. So with this you can really adjust, or really go ahead and adjust the parameters of the material that you really want until you get the exact result that you need. So if I zoom out now, just to see how that looks, you can see that now we've got quite a nice hue to that material, which is giving us a really nice pearlescent effect. So all I've done, just by simply using these two nodes, I've now been able to adjust these two colours and adjust the way in which that material now looks. I can go on a little bit further and add in any additional bump maps or textures to give a bit more depth if I really wanted to. But for this particular example, like I said, because it's quite a simplistic example, I'm more than happy with this. However, what we can do is we can go ahead and create a name. So if I just give this a name of Emixa metallic blue, I can now save this to my materials library. So you can see that this is now going to create a preview for my material, and I can now choose whereabouts I want this to be saved. So I'm going to save this under metallic, candy coat, and press OK. And now in the material library, if I go ahead and navigate to that colour, you can see that my Emixa metallic blue has now been saved into my material library, where I can reuse that later. Okay, so next I'm going to be showing you how we can create animations within Keyshot. So the animation section can be found just by clicking on the animation button at the bottom of the toolbar here. and this is generally where you find all of your animation settings. Starting the animation wizard, this is where we can find all of our animation settings or animation types. And we've got three main different types here, so we've either got environmental, camera, or part-model animations. And these allow us to manipulate our model in a few different ways. However though, to start off with, I'm going to be specifying a camera animation, which is going to affect our camera, which we're currently using. So the steps for creating an animation are relatively simple. So selecting my camera animation, I've then gone ahead and specified my camera. And now I'm just going to go ahead and specify my parameters. So you can see here I can either set my motion to ease in or ease out. Or I could just keep it as a completely kind of stock animation type. I can then also specify my duration, which is going to be the overall duration of the animation itself. And for this, because it's a camera animation that's going to orbit around the model, I'm going to specify this as the maximum amount of time. I can also specify the degrees of which this rotates as well. And you can see that when I go ahead and play this animation, then the camera is now going to orbit around the model itself. So at the moment this hasn't affected the model because we've specified a camera animation. And if I go and click on the animation itself, I can go back and re-specify any parameters that I want. So I can specify the start or end times, or even the entire duration if I wanted to. So for this, 30 seconds was a bit much, so I'm going to bring this back down to about 20 seconds. So now I'm happy with that, I'm going to go back and add in a part or model animation. And for this I'm going to go ahead and specify translation, and I'm going to use this to create an exploded animation of my model. So I can either click on the parts in the graphics window, or I can click on the parts from the scene tree on the left hand side. And from this, again, I can just go and specify my parameters, so the overall duration, how far I want each part to move, and you can see that when I manipulate these sliders, then the preview on the right hand side is going to update, and this is going to show us exactly where my part is going to end up. Now all these sliders have their job, or have their role, and again, like I said, if you watch me kind of manipulate these sliders, then you'll see where that part will end up. However though, I'm happy with that so far, so I'm just going to go ahead and specify my overall duration, and specify whether I want the part to ease in or ease out. So at the moment I've realised I've made a mistake here, so what I can do is I can go back, I can go ahead and edit these parameters, or I can go ahead and delete it if I really wasn't happy with it. So looking at these properties, I'm going to go ahead and just redefine my parameters. Again, if I specify the Y to 0, then this is going to start me off from a completely neutral position. And from here, if I wasn't too sure of what I was going to adjust, I can now use the sliders to see exactly where the model is going to, or kind of go, or the direction of where the model is going to go, before I start to commit to any form of settings. So I've now gone ahead and specified my Z translation to -1, and that's looking about correct for me. So you can see that when I've added in that model animation, the wheel has now come away from the rest of the model. And instead of having to recreate an entirely new animation, what we can do is we can then go ahead and duplicate and mirror the existing animation. And this will essentially duplicate the animation but in reverse, because we've created a mirror image of that animation itself. So if I now go ahead and play this, we can see that the animation has done exactly what it's designed to do, in terms of the wheel going away, and now the wheel has gone back in because of that mirror animation that we've created. Now there aren't any limits as to the amount of animations we can have, just really until you're happy. Up until this point, I've been showing you how to use Keyshot with Siemens Solid Edge. So how does it work with Siemens NX? Well, in answer to this question, essentially it works exactly the same. The only difference is that you'll have to actively purchase the Keyshot add-in for NX, as highlighted in one of my previous slides. But in terms of functionality, with the add-on installed, if I go to the Keyshot tab, you find that we've got the 3 buttons that are also available within Solid Edge as well. So if I was to go into settings, I can then change the tessellation quality, which will increase or decrease the quality of the model that gets exported into Keyshot. The up orientation, any separate materials, or even including NURBs that are available within NX. In terms of the update, we've got the same update function that we've got in Solid Edge, although we have the additional functionality of update with manual selection within NX. So instead of updating the entire model at once, we can go ahead and select the parts we want to be updated. This is particularly useful for if we have really big models. However, the render function essentially works the same. So with my model, if I go ahead and render, what NX can do is it's going to go ahead and export that into Keyshot, ready for us to make our render of it. Very much in the same way as Keyshot for Solid Edge. It will also bring through the properties or the material properties of the parts of our model, and we'll bring it in as a basic view style where we can go ahead and then or add or edit any additional properties that we want. Once the model's finished being uploaded, Keyshot will display the model exactly the same as in NX. Thank you for attending this webinar on Keyshot fundamentals. Any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us.